The year is 1984. A man in flowing purple robes stands before a crowd, his eyes twinkling, his voice a surprising mix of gentle laughter and righteous thunder. He's just been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, but this isn't a moment for quiet celebration. This is a battle cry. The world sees a priest, an archbishop, but South Africa sees a revolutionary, a tireless warrior against a system designed to crush the human spirit. This is the story of Desmond Tutu, the man whose faith was his weapon, whose laughter was his rebellion, and whose vision of a rainbow nation would challenge the very soul of a country torn apart by hate. How did this diminutive cleric become one of the most powerful voices against apartheid, armed with little more than a cassock and an unshakable belief in humanity? His journey wasn't one of political maneuvering or military might. It was a journey of the heart, a spiritual crusade that would bring an empire of oppression to its knees. Desmond Mpilo Tutu was born in 1931 in Klerksdorp, a gold mining town west of Johannesburg. He wasn't born into a life of activism. His father was a teacher, his mother a domestic worker. For a young black child in South Africa, the future was brutally pre-written. The system of apartheid, institutionalized in 1948, was a web of laws designed to segregate and subjugate. It dictated where you could live, what job you could hold, who you could love. It was a daily, grinding humiliation. Tutu initially followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a teacher. But he couldn't stomach teaching a curriculum designed to prepare black children for a life of servitude. In a profound act of protest, he quit. He felt a different calling, a pull towards the church. It was a decision that would change not only his life, but the course of his nation's history. For Tutu, the Bible wasn't just a book of ancient stories. It was a radical manifesto for liberation. He saw a God who sided with the oppressed, a God who believed that every single person, regardless of their skin color, was made in his image. This simple, powerful belief became the bedrock of his entire life's work. Ordained as an Anglican priest in 1961, Tutu's intellect and charisma quickly set him apart. He studied and taught in London, but his heart remained in his fractured homeland. He returned in the 1970s, a decade of rising anger and brutal suppression. The 1976 Soweto uprising, where schoolchildren protesting the use of Afrikaans in their education were met with gunfire, was a turning point. As the government banned anti-apartheid organizations and imprisoned or exiled its leaders like Nelson Mandela, a vacuum of leadership emerged. Into this void stepped Desmond Tutu. He became the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, a position that gave him a national and international platform. He was a voice for the voiceless. He used his pulpit not just to preach the gospel, but to condemn the heresy of apartheid. He argued with irrefutable moral clarity that a system built on racial hierarchy was an insult to God. His sermons were electric, filled with passion, humor, and an unwavering belief in justice. He spoke truth to power, calling out the government's hypocrisy and brutality without fear. The government saw him as a threat. They confiscated his passport, subjected him to constant harassment, and tried to silence him. But they underestimated his resolve. "You can't make me shut up," he famously declared. The more they pushed, the louder he became. He traveled the globe, urging international governments to impose economic sanctions on South Africa. He argued that this was the only nonviolent way to force the apartheid regime to the negotiating table. His message was simple. You cannot do business with a government that denies the basic humanity of its own people. It was a controversial stance, with critics claiming sanctions would hurt the very black South Africans he sought to help. But Tutu was unflinching. He believed that short-term suffering was preferable to the endless agony of apartheid. In 1984, the world listened. Awarding him the Nobel Peace Prize wasn't just an honor. It was a global endorsement of the anti-apartheid movement and a devastating blow to the legitimacy of the Pretoria government. The small-town boy had become the moral conscience of the world. When the pillars of apartheid finally began to crumble, and Nelson Mandela walked free in 1990, Tutu was there, weeping with joy. But his work was far from over. Freedom was one thing, healing was another. How does a nation recover from decades of state-sponsored terror? How do victims and perpetrators live side by side? This was the challenge of the new South Africa. Tutu was appointed by President Mandela to chair the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC. This was perhaps his most difficult and most important role. The TRC wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. It offered a painful, public stage for victims to share their stories of torture, loss, and humiliation. It also offered amnesty to perpetrators who came forward and gave a full, honest confession of their crimes. It was a radical experiment in justice, built on the African concept of Ubuntu, the idea that my humanity is bound up in yours. Tutu presided over these hearings with profound empathy, often crying openly as he listened to the harrowing testimonies. He absorbed the nation's pain, embodying the spirit of forgiveness he preached. The TRC was not without its critics. Some felt it let criminals off too easily. Others felt it didn't go far enough to deliver justice. But Tutu believed it was the only way forward, a path away from a cycle of vengeance and towards a shared future. He envisioned a rainbow nation, a country that celebrated its diversity rather than being divided by it. He championed this vision with his characteristic joy and infectious laughter, becoming a symbol of hope and reconciliation around the world. Even after retiring from public life, the Arch, as he was affectionately known, never stopped fighting for justice. He spoke out against inequality, corruption within the new government, and human rights abuses globally. His moral compass never wavered. Desmond Tutu showed the world that faith could be a revolutionary force. He proved that one person armed with courage, compassion, and an unshakable belief in the goodness of humanity can indeed change the world. His legacy isn't just in the dismantling of apartheid, it's in the enduring power of forgiveness, the defiant joy of the human spirit, and the beautiful complex vision of the rainbow nation. Thank you so much for watching. If this story of courage and faith inspired you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the figures who shaped our history. We'll see you next time.